I'll eat in a little bit. Hey, do you got lemon water in there for me? Yeah. Yeah. What's going on, everybody? We're back. We're doing a live. It's been a busy last month for us, so happy to be back talking about gardening stuff. I'm just still getting set up on YouTube here, so give me a sec, and then we'll get into it. What's going on, MNav? What's up, Margaret? Hey, everybody. Well, today what I wanted to do was I wanted to tell you guys first where we've been, because we haven't really been on Instagram as of late, or TikTok, but we've still been posting stuff on YouTube. YouTube has always kind of been our thing, so I always try to keep the YouTube cycle going. But we've been so last month, towards like the end of last month, we've been trying to sell our house, and for the last 9 months we've been trying to sell the house ourselves. And then with all the propaganda in the media and stuff, it affected the market slightly out here, so we decided to take it off the market, and then decided, all right, well, let's relist it sometime after Labor Day. Well, my buddy, who's an agent out in San Francisco, decided he was going to be the one. We decided to go with him, so he's going to be listing the house for us. So the hope is that it will sell and we'll get the right price for it. So yeah, it's been kind of a tricky last 4 months for us. We took it off in May and then decided, okay, we're going to relist it. He had suggested redoing some stuff to the house. I'm pretty good with construction, so I decided to take on that project, which was remodeling an entire kitchen in a month. So that's where we've been. We've just been super busy trying to get the house ready to go back on the market. We've gotten to a point now where things have slowed down a little bit, and we've been able to kind of catch our breath. But on top of that, we decided that we had gotten some quotes from stagers. It was like $23,000 to stage our house, to stage it ourselves. So, or to hire a stager to stage our house. So we decided, well, Ashley, her background is interior design. That's what she did for 10, 11 years before we got into farming and stuff. And so she's got an eye for that sort of stuff. And so we decided, well, let's just purchase the stuff ourselves and then just stage it ourselves. Why do we need to hire a stager, pay them $23,000 to stage our house when we can purchase all the stuff ourselves, find it on like, hey, Kelly, good to see you. We can just find all the stuff ourselves and just stage the house ourselves and not have to waste $23,000 doing it. So what we decided to do was, Ashley's the stager. I've been kind of the guy that's had to run around with the truck and pick up all the furniture and all the random stuff and bring it back to the house and then assemble all the furniture that we've purchased. And it's all coming together, and we're kind of at the tail end of that cycle. So I thought it would be cool to jump back on social media and just kind of fill you guys in on what we've been up to. I know a lot of you have been reaching out on Instagram and YouTube and stuff like that, and asking how we've been and what we've been up to. So been up to a lot. Yeah, just trying to get this house sold and get it ready. And then all the furniture that's left in there, we're gonna try to do some Airbnb arbitrage and get a couple of units and throw that furniture in those units, and hopefully, make a little money there as well. So yeah, but that's not why we're that's not why I jumped on here today. I just wanted to fill everybody in on what we've been up to. But yeah, we've been harvesting a ton of stuff from the garden. So I just wanted to talk about it. I just wanted to talk about harvesting some of the stuff that we've been harvesting, give you guys some like tips and tricks on when certain stuff should be harvested, give you some pointers on storage. So like if you're picking something, how to properly wash it and store it to get the longest lifespan out of your food. So yeah, so hopefully everybody has been in the garden and reaping all the benefits of the hard work that you put in this spring, and been able to enjoy some of the foods you've produced. Right now is kind of like prime harvest time. The way the cycle works is more like spring, you're getting all your crops in, and then right like around 4th of July to like into September, you're really getting all your tomatoes and your peppers and your eggplants and a lot of the longer season stuff. You're finally getting to harvest that and enjoy it. And as the season kind of winds down and we go into the fall, you'll notice that of a lot of those crops that were producing a lot in like August through like mid-September start to slow down, and you don't get to enjoy as much of a harvest. It's time to also think about pulling that stuff out of the ground and putting some stuff in there to get one final push before the winter hits. Now, some of you might be in like areas where the winters are pretty brutal and you get a lot of snow and you can't really grow a lot during the winter. But some of you might be in California like us, or a southern region where winter time you can actually grow a lot, and you end up growing a lot of those greens that might not have worked during those summer months. So we'll talk a little bit about that. When it comes to harvesting stuff, we've figured it out just from the years of farming, harvesting stuff and then getting it out to our grocery stores, getting it out to the farmers markets, and making sure that when that person receives those crops, that they first off look healthy, second off that they are clean, and then third off that they have a long life cycle once they've been harvested. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of walk you through some of the typical stuff you'll harvest during the summer months, and how to make sure you get the longest life you can out of those crops. So I figure maybe we'll start with just talking about like veggies, like leafy veggies, leafy greens. We do a lot of leafy greens, a lot of salad mixes. That's what we sell to a lot of our grocery stores. And what's cool about a lot of the leafy greens is they're cut and come again, meaning you get multiple harvests off one crop. So I could go and I could harvest some arugula and I could cut it, store it, and sell it. And then within like 2 weeks, there's a new set of arugula and I can recut off that. So typically during the summer months, you're getting about 2 cuttings off of a bed. So when I say like leafy greens, we grow a lot of like tatsoi and arugula and lettuce and mustard greens. Mosh is probably like more of a winter one. Watercress is more of a winter one. But yeah, those are some of the leafy greens that we do a lot of. Typically, when I harvest greens, I'm harvesting them early in the morning to avoid heat. And this is important with a lot of leafy greens, because if you harvest something when it's the peak of the day, when it's really hot out, then that food is not going to last as long, right? So I always try to harvest early in the morning. After I bring the harvest in, I kind of sort. So I go through, I figure I pull out any yellow leaves, any rotting leaves, any weeds that I might have harvested. I pick all that stuff out, and I get rid of it. Then I take it in the fridge and I put it in cold storage. Now, one key thing you didn't hear me mention is washing, because I don't wash any of my crops. If there's a little dirt on some root crops, like some radish or turnips or carrots, I will wash that off. But leafy greens, there's no need to wash them. And when you do wash them, you're washing off all of the elevated biotics. And elevated biotics are probably the most important thing when you're eating leafy greens to get in your body, because they help your liver produce the B12. So elevated biotics are extremely important. And when you wash your crops, you're washing that stuff off. And what happens? Well, in grocery stores and farms everywhere, they like triple wash your leafy greens. The stuff you buy in the store, it even says it on the front of the container, triple washed, which means they've just washed all of the good stuff off of the crops, and then you never know what they washed it with, right? If it's city water, then that water is just contaminated with chlorine and fluoride and antibiotics, and who you know could be a lot of other things in your water supply ending up on those crops. So yeah, don't wash it. This is how we've always done it, and we've never had problems. You might end up seeing some bugs on there, but that's okay. A lot of times they just make their way off, and um, they don't really cause any harm. Then we just put it in the fridge, and after we do all of that, the crop typically lasts a week or more. And we typically will harvest and then use we've got these bags, and I'll link the bags that we use, but they just got holes in it, and the holes allow airflow. Now, a lot of times farms, they won't use the bags with the holes in it, which is a bad mistake, because anytime you get moisture going in that bag, the crop spoils. So make sure when you harvest this stuff, you put it in a bag with holes in it, so then the crop stays nice and cool and gets the airflow going, and it will last a lot longer. Um, Now, with like root crops, for example, we usually will harvest in the morning, because most of the root crops, they do have leaves on top of them, and if you're harvesting radish or turnips, you can eat those leaves, and you want to eat those leaves. Like radish leaves are the most potent, powerful leafy green on this planet. Most people gravitate towards other leafy greens, but radish greens are like the ultimate leafy green. So you should be keeping the radish greens and throwing them in your salads or smoothies, or just eating them raw. So yeah, I harvest a lot of my root crops in the early morning. Um, Same deal. I'll pull off like any of the yellow rotting leaves, the weeds, stuff like that. I'll lightly wash it, very lightly wash. I just want to get that dirt off. And that's only because we're selling the stuff, and we have to have it look good, because people buy stuff that looks good. They're not going to buy something with a bunch of dirt on it. So we'll typically store it in the fridge from that point on. A lot of farms will use cold storage. When I'm harvesting some of my root crops, like with beets, for example, we don't grow a lot of beets, because a lot of the beets are GMO. So we kind of avoid beets. But if you're someone out there that doesn't care about that and wants to eat beets, typically I pick my beets when they're like 2 to 3 inches. and then I'll harvest them in the field, and I'll put like 3 to 5 per bunchel, and then I'll leave the leaves on. I sell them with the leaves because that's kind of an added bonus. People love beet greens, so I leave the leaves on. And beets are very popular at the market for whatever reason, so we did grow them when we were farming up north. Carrots are also a very popular root crop. We sell a lot of those at the farmers markets. Typically, when I'm harvesting carrots, I'll pick one or two to kind of get an idea of the size. Typically, when they kind of pop up, you'll notice that they're ready. As long as they have the color and the taste, then they're ready for harvest. And we typically will just use a pitchfork, loosen the soil first, and then harvest away. Radishes, typically with radishes, we're harvesting about a 2-inch diameter, so not very big. The bigger that the radishes get, they start to get spongy, they'll split, or they'll start to be very coarse instead of smooth. So the earlier you pick the radishes, the better. We plant ours out in 6, so we'll plant one crop every 2 weeks. So we always have that succession of radishes going, and we'll typically do about 6 to 12 per bunchel because they're not that big. You don't want them super big, and the bigger they get, the spicier they get. So not many people at the market typically don't like it really, really spicy. So we try to keep it not as spicy. Turnips are a great one. That's like one of our favorite root crops to grow. We grow the Tokyo turnips. Those are the white turnips, and yeah, they're super mild. Don't have any like funky taste to them. They're not woody. They're they're very, very, very tasty. Turnips you can grow pretty close together, and what we'll do is we'll like pick one, and then uh, if they're in it like a bunchel of 4 in the ground, then when you pick one, the other 3 start to get bigger. Then you pick the other, and then the other 2 start to get bigger, and then before you know it, there's just one in the ground, and that one in the ground all of a sudden just keeps growing and gets nice and big. So um, turnips are one of those things that you don't really necessarily have to worry about spacing too much. You can space them pretty close together, and they'll kind of push each other out and compete for space, and then you just pick them. But after about 3 weeks, I'd say turnips start to get stringy, and they lose their tenderness. So like after 3 weeks, I kind of give up on the turnips, and any of the ones that we are picking, I might cook instead of put on salads because they just don't taste the same. Um, we do succession planting with this. The leaves on the turnips typically are good for like a week in cold storage, and then once those leaves go bad, you can just cut the leaves off and then just sell turnips just by themselves without the leaves. So no need to like throw the turnips away because of that. Um, they'll split if they're in the ground too long. So definitely pick them at the right time. Um, with carrots are a good survival crop. So there's going to be some stuff I'm talking about here that are like survival crops. Like if you were in a situation where you were growing food and you had to survive a winter off whatever you grow, well, carrots are a good one because they can last for like 6 months in cold storage. So carrots, are really good for that as well. Uh, Broccoli and cauliflower, we grow a lot of that during like the spring and the fall, but typically I'll just cut the top off. I like to leave like 5 to 6 inches of stem. Put in cold storage. They will last for like a week in cold storage. If it's like around like 39, 40 degrees, typically last a week. With cauliflower, same deal. You just cut it, leave 5 to 6 inches on it, and with cauliflower, when they're like 5 to 8 inches in diameter. That's typically when I cut them. Beans and peas. Beans and peas, I pick beans when they're like pencil size in diameter. The diameter is like the size of a pencil. And when the seeds start to form in the pods, if you pick them too late, they turn yellow, don't taste as good. Peas, I typically will pick when the pods are nice and round and filled. If you wait too long with peas, they're going to become like real stringy and tough. So you got to pick them at the right time. Peas are tricky because you have to keep harvesting them. So it's like every 2 to 3 days, you're like on it, harvesting those peas nonstop. But peas are cool because, they will last, keep for like a week, and they will remain as long as, they're in like a fridge or cold storage. Now, celery is a good one because everybody, if you follow medical medium information, celery is one we should all be growing in our gardens. We go through it every single day, so it's important to get your celery in. You want to blanch it though, right? Have you ever grown celery where like you grow celery and then the celery is like very bitter? It just doesn't taste like the stuff you get in the stores. Well, it's because the celery that you get in the stores is blanched, and blanching is okay. It's not going to take away from like the nutritional content of that celery. Blanching is fine, and blanching will improve the taste of it, right? So what I would do, hey Catherine, what I would do is how I would blanch it is when your celery gets big enough, just take a PVC pipe, like cut PVC, and then just stick it at the base of your celery. It is growing. This is like, I do this like maybe 2 weeks before I harvest. Put the PVC at the base of the celery, and then as the celery grows, it's going to be looking for some of that light, and the bottom will be blanched, and it will taste like the stuff you get in the store. I also don't harvest the whole celery at one time. I don't cut the whole bunch at one time and then walk it off to the kitchen. I take the stalks off one at a time. So I take however many stalks I need for that morning to make my celery juice. I cut the leaves off because the leaves add to the bitterness. Get any dirt off that's on it, and then if whatever I don't harvest, I just put in the fridge, or whatever I don't use, I put in the fridge. But yeah, everybody should be growing celery, and this winter, because winter time is when celery grows good here. So I'm gonna do like a start to finish celery guide for everybody, so you can see how I grow celery from like start to finish. It won't come out probably till like the spring next year or something like that, but that's okay. I think it's a good one. Now let's talk about like some of those ones people are probably harvesting right now because it's summertime. During the summer, we grow a lot of cucumbers, a lot of those eggplants, a lot of tomatoes and squash. And let's talk about some of those. So cucumbers, you ideally want to harvest them when they're 8 to 14 inches in length. Okay. And these are for like the English cucumbers, which are more cold tolerant. So you can grow English cucumbers and they can withstand a little more of that cold weather. So if you have problems growing cucumbers, maybe give that a go. In cold areas, you can also grow lemon cucumbers are a great one. Apple cucumbers are a great one. Those are kind of some of the ones we grow. There's a Lebanese cucumber. The Lebanese ones get about 6 inches before you cut them. I'll typically be picking cucumbers every 2 to 3 days. They kind of grow crazy. I just mist them with some cold water after I harvest them. I don't dunk them in water like most farms do. And then with the English, you can wrap them in like, I know in the stores you them in plastic because they'll last even longer if you wrap them in plastic. Eggplants, they can be harvested pretty much at any stage of growth. I've got some eggplant here. I'll show you. So we grow like these smaller eggplants. Um, Now you harvest them at any time, but you don't want to harvest it, let them go too long, because then they turn this kind of like yellow color. They lose the whiteness within them. When they turn that yellow color, they don't taste as good. They're more bitter. So, yeah, we always harvest at the perfect time, right when they're about this size, about a medium size day. We don't harvest them when they're super small unless it's at the end of the season, but harvest them when they're like that medium size. I always choose varieties that are smaller in size. So instead of growing the varieties like those big ones you get in the stores, those just take forever to grow, and you typically need like a greenhouse because eggplants need a lot of heat. So you can have some success with that if you're in a hotter area. But where we are, it gets, we have our hot days and our cold days. It's been like in the hundreds the last week here. Um, and the eggplant has been growing like crazy. So we've been harvesting a lot of it. But I go for the smaller varieties. And if you want it to last longer, get it in the fridge. Mostly everything, just get it in the fridge after you've harvested it, and it'll stay the longest. With kale, Swiss chard, like collard greens, we grow a lot of those. Usually want to pick in the morning because it's cooler. Crop's going to last longer. They'll last, I've had kale that's lasted through the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. They need to be cooled immediately after they're picked, and they'll last like a week in cold storage. So tomatoes, we were talking about some of those longer season crops. So like tomatoes, when you harvest tomatoes, I typically harvest my tomatoes when they're like this yellow color. So there's a little tomato. So when they go from green to yellow, that's when I harvest them. And then eventually on my countertop, they'll turn to like this red color. So we grew a bunch of different varieties this year. We grow kind of a mix of like cherry tomatoes and a mix of those medium-sized tomatoes. Now with the cherry tomatoes, some of our favorites this year, I mean the Sun Gold is always like one of the best. That's like this orange color one. And that's your sweetest, like that's the sweetest cherry tomato. That's the sweetest tomato I've seen out there. But this year we've been growing these real pretty ones. These are called the Napa Chardonnays, and they're very, very sweet. They're not as sweet as the Sun Golds, but it does have some real sweetness to it. And then we were growing these. I can't remember the names, but this was no good anyway. So those are kind of the two favorites of this year. But I always pick mine when they turn from their green color to the next color. I let them ripen on my shelf, and then the plant just continues to produce more and more tomatoes, right? And it's important when you're picking them not to damage them, because if you damage them, they're going to have a shorter life cycle, right? So when you pick them, don't like throw them in a bin. Pick them and put them in like a nice bag where they're not going to get damaged or anything like that. But they'll last over a week in cold storage. Same thing goes with like melon. It's important not to damage the melon when you pick the melon. You can harvest melon pretty much at any time of the day. They don't really need cold storage. They like the ambient temperature. So whatever the temperature is in the house, that's cool. And you can pick them a little early and let them ripen on the countertop. They will, if they're like overripe, get them in the fridge immediately, because then they'll stay nice and cool, and you'll be able to enjoy that melon for a longer period of time. Watermelons are cool though, because they will last they'll stay fresh for like 2 weeks at room temperature. So yeah, and watermelons are always refreshing and good during those summer months. Summer crop, a lot of basil. So if you guys are doing like a lot of basil during the summer, I typically will harvest that at any time of the day. I'll pick when it goes to seed, I'll pick those off, and then it will just allow the crop to keep producing. Important with basil is don't put it in a bag that's going to get a lot of condensation, because any sort of water will allow those leaves to turn black. So you want to keep basil leaves actually really, really dry. And then put it in the fridge. Give it some cold storage. Summer squash, you can harvest that like every 2 to 3 days. You're getting more and more summer squash. You'll get so much summer squash that you won't be able to even get rid of it. I'll show you. Let me grab some of the stuff we grew. So this is a yellow striped squash. And this is one we always grow every year. We don't let them get this big. This is way too big, but we just couldn't keep up with them this summer because we were over at the house working, and then it pop out there, and a squash is that big. It's crazy. They grow so quick. So you got to stay on top of it because you want to harvest them when they're like 6 to 8 inches. You don't want to let them get that big, because if you get them when they're 6 to 8 inches, they'll continue to produce and continue to get nice and big. And that's what you want. You don't want a big squash. You want them when they're nice and small. You can also pick the flowers. You can pick the flowers, but pick the flowers like at dawn in the evening time, because the flowers need to unfurl. So when the flowers unfurl, it's a good time to pick it, because then it's going to last longer. So if I'm bringing squash blossoms to the market, I would pick them at like dawn, put them in cold storage, and then take them to market the next day. But that's it. They're pretty much done after probably the morning market. I mean, they spoil pretty quick. I don't wash any of my summer squash. I just put it in cold storage. We do a lot of onions. Onions are a good like survival crop. They do last a long time. They'll last typically 4 to 7 months in a cool, dark place. So it's a good one to grow and then store all winter long, even into like next year. Typically when I harvest, I'll just put some water, clean off the dirt, put in cold storage. I'll typically cut the stems off, but leave like an inch of the onion top, and then I'll just let it sit in the sun for a couple days to cure. So cure, just to dry. And then when the neck, that 1 inch neck, has gone from like that green color to a yellow color, that means that it's cured and it's ready for storage. And then what I'll do is put it in like a mesh bag, because it needs the air. And then I'll just put it in a cold place, and then they'll sit and they'll store for 4 to 7 months. Peppers don't keep, well, I guess they keep about 10 days is what I've observed, 7 to 10 days. It's best to pick them, sell them right away. Usually you're harvesting twice a week on that. Now I'll show you some of the peppers that we're growing this year. Now I'll give you some tips on peppers. So these are some orange chili peppers. Now I'm not someone who likes super spicy, like really, really spicy. And these are chili peppers. So I actually let them just turn orange, and then I harvest them when they're orange. When they're red is like this ripe. If you're harvesting anything when it's green and eating when it's green, you're crazy. You should be harvesting it when it's red. Red means ready. So this is a purple pepper, and it says to eat it when it's purple. But if you don't eat it when it's purple and you just let it keep ripening, eventually it turns red. So with these chili peppers, if I just let them continue to ripen, they would eventually go from orange to red. And when it went to red, I'm sure it'd be really, really spicy, and I wouldn't enjoy it as much. So that's why I pick these when they're orange and not let them get red. But red means ripe. Red means it's got all of its nutritional value in it, and that's the best time to consume. So that's a little tip on peppers: is let your jalapenos turn red. Don't get them when they're green. Let your Anaheim peppers turn red. Don't buy them when they're green. Now, winter squash is a good one. We had some questions on while we've been working on the house. Someone had asked us about winter squash and what the best time to harvest winter squash is. So there's actually some clues. So you kind of have to go down your clue list here on what you're seeing with your squash. Check the hardness. So I've got kabocha squash here. So you want to feel it. You want to check the hardness. Is it hard? Is it soft still? If it's hard, that's a good sign. You want the hard shell. Another sign is you'll see like a duller appearance, and then they'll have full color when they're fully ripe. So you can see here, this is fully ripe, fully orange. It has that really bright color to it. And that's what you want to look for before you harvest. You don't want to harvest it if it's still white or if it's still kind of a duller color. Another sign is look for a ground spot. So see that spot right there? That's a ground spot. You'll see this same spot in melons. Now, if you ever see a ground spot like this in a melon, that's a really good sign. That's a sign that you should probably pick up that melon, because if you have the sunspot, that means it's fully ripe, right? So when you go and pick up melons, sometimes you can't. The trick is always trying to figure out, well, how do I know that my melon is ripe? Well, look for the sunspot. You see this spot, and the other thing with melons is you'll see like these veins kind of running along the melon. And when you see these marks on a melon, that means those are sugar veins. Those are sugar marks. So if you see one with a sunspot with the sugar veins on it, that means, man, that's going to be a good melon. So you definitely want to pick that up if you see something like that. Now, another thing with the winter squash is they do last through the winter. They can get all the way down to 26 degrees, or 28, 30 degrees, depending on where you are. But they do go pretty low before they start to die off. You could always put a tarp over them, and the tarp will just extend the growing season for the winter squash. So something to keep in mind. You can always put a cloth over it, and then they'll last even longer if something's not like fully ripe and ready to be harvested yet. But I would definitely follow those guidelines before you harvest anything. You don't want to eat a squash that is green inside. That means it's not ready. But squash is another survival food. Your winter squash will last you all winter long, typically, depending on the squash, right? Like I think acorn squash is like 1 to 2 months. Delicata, which is one of our favorites, that one is typically like 2 to 3 months. Spaghetti's like that. Pumpkins are like that. Butternut typically like 3 to 6 months. Buttercup which is one I did a video on. That one will last 3 to 6 months. Kabocha though, 4 to 6 months. And kabocha is like one of my all-time favorites now. So if you're not growing this, then pick some of it up at the farmer's market. Now I want to show you something cool. So this year I saved some squash seeds from an organic farm in the area, and I planted them this year, and I got this. Pretty cool, right? So this is like its own squash variety. So typically when a squash is getting ready to produce any sort of fruit, it needs to be pollinated. Now, sometimes fruit gets cross-pollinated, and when two plants cross-pollinate each other, the the seeds that are produced from that cross-pollination, you'll end up getting stuff like this. So this is the true form of a kabocha squash, where this is like a hybrid of two plants that have cross-pollinated. So you'll have, this kind of looks like a delicata mixed with a pumpkin. But I ended up growing a bunch of stuff that looks like this, which I have no idea what it's going to taste like, but that's the exciting part about planting seeds that have been crossed with other plants, is you never know what you're going to get. You could end up getting something pretty cool. The last thing I want to talk about is potatoes, because potatoes are a big part of what we eat every single night. We're always snacking on steamed potatoes. So I wanted to show you something I did this year. Here's some of my potatoes. And I grew potatoes this year in just these 1-gallon containers, which is like very, anybody can do this. You can throw a couple potatoes in some dirt and they'll grow. And then when they die off like this, that means they're ready and you can dig them up. So we'll just see, if I got any potatoes in here. A lot of times you might end up with potatoes that you can always reuse. So I got just, little guys here. Some little potatoes. So I'll just use these for seed next year and then regrow them. But I've got a whole big thing of them. So those are just some of them. I'll continue to look and see what else I get. But something we're trying, growing them in those 1-gallon containers. Potatoes are good because they last like 6 to 8 months. So as long as they're in a cool, dark place and they stay cool, then they won't try to sprout on you, and then they'll end up lasting you a long time. Just want to store it in a cool place, like 40 to 50 degree weather, which is pretty common during the winter months. So they'll at least store during the winter, and then you just have to keep them cool after that. Another thing about potatoes is when you wash them before you store them, they won't last as long. So when I harvest my potatoes, I don't wash them, because when you wash them, they're not going to last as long. So just pick them, put them in a mesh bag, put them so they get some air, and then just throw them in a cool, dark place. Now, when I harvest, it's very easy for me because all my beds are 30 inches. If you watch some of my earlier videos, I talk about that. Like 30-inch beds are the way to go, so you can straddle the bed. It makes it very easy on your body to harvest everything, right? Rather than having to bend down and pick stuff up, you can just kind of lean over and grab what you need. But yeah, so I really just wanted to jump on here and talk to you about harvesting, because I'm pretty sure everybody's kind of harvesting stuff at this point in the season. Or at least I hope you are, because that means you've had some success in the garden this year. So the plan with these lives is I'm going to try to do them. I'm going to try to do them maybe once every 2 weeks. But once the house wraps up, our plan is we're kind of due for like a long needed road trip, a little vacation. So me and Ashley and our baby will be doing a little road trip, taking a little trip after this house hits the market. And not sure if we'll be really doing lives, or maybe we'll figure out some fun way to do it. But we're planning on just kind of driving, taking a little drive. No real plan on where we're going to go yet, but check out some other states and check out stuff outside of California. So yeah. Hey, Brianna. Yeah, what cold storage do you have or recommend? Well, it depends on where you are. I mean, A big fridge is always good because that's going to keep it a steady like 40 to 50 degrees, which is like the perfect weather to store stuff. There's if you're looking for big storage, there's a thing called a CoolBot, which is basically a device that goes on um, a air conditioner, and it like makes the air conditioner a timer where you can actually get a little digital screen that controls the temperature, and it controls the timer, so you can tell it when to turn on and off, and you can control the temperature. So that's more of a bigger solution, is like the CoolBot system. If you're like small storage, if you have a basement, usually basements work out great because uh, anything under the ground, under like once you hit right around 2 feet, the steady temperature is typically in the 50s. So if you have like a root cellar or a basement, you can store everything down there, and typically it will last, and you won't have to, it won't cost you anything, right? Like if you do the CoolBot, you got an air conditioner going, and that's costing you money, right? Where if you just put it in your basement, it's going to stay cool down there, and you won't have to worry about the high electric bill on that. But I've also seen people take like a culvern, the culverns that they put underneath the roadways. So when you're driving over a road and there's like a little river that floods the freeway, they'll typically take this big culvert and put it under the freeway. And then what I've seen people do is dig like a little notch into like the side of a mountain, and then put the culvert in there, cover it with dirt, and then that build like a door on it, and then they use that as like a cold storage. So yeah, you kind of want to do stuff when you're in a situation where it's life or death, or like you got to grow food and it's got to last. That's a better solution, is just digging a hole, putting like a culvert in there, and then using that as your cold storage, and just doing it under some trees where it's shaded and it stays cool, and it's free. It's not going to cost you any money, and you'll be prepared if you can't use any power for anything. So yeah, just some ideas. I mean, once our plan is, once we get this house sold, we want to get back on the land, start farming again, bigger than what we've been doing here. It's been fun doing urban farming, but we're kind of at a point now where we're ready for some change, and we're ready to get back on some land and do kind of what we did 2 years ago in a big greenhouse, growing our own food. So yeah, we're excited to get this house sold and see what's in store for our next move. So yeah, we'll keep you guys updated on all that. But cool. Well, I'm gonna eat some dinner right now. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Feel free to reach out if you have other questions. We're getting back in the loop on social media, so we should start posting stuff more. House should be done this week, at the end of the week. So probably no live next week, but the following week, when we got some time, we'll maybe sit down and have some time. So hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll see you guys when I see you. Bye.